From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
First of all, even before we start, thank you all for coming. I think Dafnis and I are going to talk a little bit about a number of things, and then towards the end we're going to open it up for anybody who might have some questions. So we hope you'll participate. Okay? Good evening, everyone. It's a great pleasure to welcome our special guest today, drummer, composer, and band leader, Dafnis Prieto. Dafnis, great to see you again.
Thank you. Great to see you too. Thank you for having me here.
Yes, our pleasure. This conversation is part of our Music in the Brain series, so it might be appropriate to begin by asking you a question that many drummers grapple with. How do you train your brain to subdivide rhythms?
First of all, that comes from the way you have to think first that music, we organize sounds. And that's the way actually the brain works. You identify sound, you organize them in your head, and then you distribute them in your mind when you hear them before actually even play it. So the perspective and the receptive mode, it has to be organized in order to actually play organized.
Mm-hmm. So when we're young, the first rhythm we hear and feel is our heartbeat.
Yes.
And so then how do you layer and make it feel natural to superimpose rhythms on top of your heartbeat?
That does takes a lot of discipline. That's the discipline that it takes to actually feel comfortable in the fact itself of being conscious of how to manipulate the information of sound. And for me, it has taken a lot of all these years. I mean, I started playing music since I was like 7 years old, and it has taken me a lot of time. I'm actually writing a book that it concerns about that intellectual and analytical process of how to actually perceive sound at the same time. You know, that's kind of the introductory thing before to get to what I'm giving, or in the book itself. But I think we all drummers has a different perception actually, and we all musicians, even though we may have jointly the same reasons to play music, we do have different reasons why we do play music.
And so why don't you give us some examples for why you play music?
Okay, there is different things. You can get more close to the intellectual side of it, which involve the mathematic part of it, and involve the all the theories basically. And there is the emotional and the spiritual part of it at the same time, which involve everything else of feeling and emotions and anything you can express from inside yourself, recreating your soul basically. So for me the great path is when you actually join them together, and it becomes this wonderful path that it grows around the intellectual and the spiritual and emotional things. So actually three things happening at the same time, and as much as you elevate that, you will be elevating yourself as a musician or a human being as well.
Is this a conscious decision or choice to keep these three things in sync? In other words, what do you have to do to get to this point?
Work on how to be conscious of it. One of the first questions for me was, what do I want to play? The answer was, I want to play what I want to hear. And that's actually how it comes down to me. What are the things that make me play music, and made me analyze music, and made me project myself as a musician and in terms of sound, and that was kind of the right answer that I found to myself.
So you've been playing since you were 7.
Mm-hmm.
Have the things that you've heard in your head and the things that motivated you to play, the things that you wanted to hear, have those changed? And if
Of
so,
course, yeah.
How so?
It's still changing. Because my perception change, my understanding does change, and every day I'm different. So already, you know, also we change the emotional and the perception of it by the time that you listen to music, even in the same day. It doesn't have to wait that long. So you know, I've listened, as you mentioned, music that I used to listen, you know, when I was you know, around that time, and now I listen so many other things that I didn't, of course, listen at that time because I didn't was conscious of it. So now I am a little bit more conscious of it, and I can pay more attention to it and recreate that. Yes.
You've spent a good part of your life practicing your craft, developing your technique, but so much of your music involves improvisation.
Mm-hmm.
So I want you to talk a little bit about how you prepare to be in the moment.
I practice that as well. I think creativity, which involves improvisation, intellectually speaking, it is a muscle to me. And I do try to develop creativity as every day as much as I can. Develop my physical and craft. Let's put it that way, on my drum set, on the piano, or whenever I'm you know, creating sound. So it's a muscle. You train it for, and then you the same thing. You take it to a level where you can really. The idea for me, in that specific point of feeling good while you improvise, is to match all these three things, but at the same time there is a power that I call the power of giving, and that power, it has to really come through, and it becomes the first answer that I gave to you is that you want to play what you want to hear, and that takes a lot of years to do that, because sometimes musicians, we do play from the inside, and we sometimes forget how it's sounding in the other side, and to get that balance from the player, in this case player and instrument, which I see it in one as one unit, and then the receptor, which is, you know, the audience in itself. If you're able to be playing and there at the same time, that's a great thing to have, because then you are levitating. See, that's one of some things that I felt sometimes when I'm playing. I feel like I'm levitating, because I'm not there anymore physically. I'm just responding to my own ideas that are coming through so fast, and it happens in such a small, you know, time, that the only thing that I have to do is just be in that medium thing, and I feel like I'm levitating, like my own thing just stays up, like I can even see myself from above.
So it's a kind of detachment.
Yes, it is.
And yet you're still involved.
Yes.
Does this happen every night?
No.
Would you like it to happen every night?
Oh yeah. This is literally a consciousness sound of orgasm.
Really?
Yeah. It's an ecstasy. It's a spiritual ecstasy.
So is there something you can do to approach that, to get to that point?
You can enrich the craft that you're working with, and you definitely could enrich your intellectual and spiritual path as well, and you just have to desire that happens, but without looking for it. It is the same giving power that you throw up there, the one that is gonna make you elevate in those terms. You know?
Do you have a physiological response to certain rhythms?
I do. I have more. I feel more related to certain rhythms than others.
For example?
The rhythms that I was born with, for me, are very natural. I mean, clave for me is something that it came to me in a sort of innate or generic way that I don't have to think about it.
Hmm. It's a kind of heartbeat. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's something that I never even thought that much about it at the beginning. For me, it was something that was there that I actually put there in different places in the music, and we used to actually make jokes and just play any American music and put the clave on top of it. You relate yourself, who you are, and those informations that you have with anything that is around you as well.
Perhaps for those who might view this
Yes.
Website, can you just very briefly explain what clave is and how you might use it in your music?
Sure. Well, in Cuba, we have a various amount of claves, but the more distinctive one and the ones that are more known are the Cuban clave and the rumba clave. The Cuban clave, later on, after being created and the whole thing, I actually learned about the terminology of 3-2 and 2-3 clave outside of Cuba, believe it or not. But there has been somehow giving a terminology of 3 and 2 side of it, okay, in this clave. The 3 side is divided in half, the clave, the rhythm itself, and there is 3 notes that happens in the first part, and there is 2 notes that happen in the second part of it. So if I give you 4 beats, it would be tang, 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 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Then the rumba clave is almost the same clave, but there is a certain delay in the notes that you play in the middle. There is 5 notes, right? So it's tang, 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 tang. That's Cuban clave, right? Tang, tang, and then the rumba clave, tang, 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 tang. Okay? I mean, I will have to, write it down so you can see it, and the whole thing, it will be more maybe clear for some of you that know music. But in any case, these 2 claves could start in the 3 side of it, or either in the 2 side of it. So you can start in the 3 side, we did it already, and then in the 2 side is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, kang, 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 ka, 1, 1. And the same thing happened with the Cuban and the rumba clave. We call it rumba or guaguancó clave. These are the 2 claves that are most well known, outside of Cuba. There is a lot of different claves in the Afro-Cuban tradition as well, and a lot of different information.
And these claves are generally played with these wooden sticks called clave?
They are played with wooden sticks, and actually tonight, if some of you come to the show, I'll be playing a solo with clave and voice.
All right.
Yes.
Is it improvised? Is it composed?
It is completely improvised. Yes.
Do you ever dream about music?
I dream all the time about music. And I always say that I play better when I'm dreaming.
Do you literally have a pad next to your bed and write down ideas?
Mm-hmm.
And have these ideas shown up in your work?
Oh, yeah.
For example, which pieces came from dreams?
Some pieces that you will hear tonight, like one that I play that is called Claveteo. It's a piece that I dedicate specifically to the clave rhythm, but it is actually it's a lot of different layers of the clave played by different instruments, happening in different parts of the beats. So one instrument starts in the first beat, the other one starts in the third, and then the second, and then the fourth, and we all jointly go to different places structurally with this idea of the clave. But I do have a lot of dreams about music, and I keep that pad there, and sometimes when I don't have it, I really feel sorry that I have to wake up and go to my living room and start writing.
Do you write at the piano?
I do write at the piano, yes.
We all gravitate just naturally towards things that we're comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
As a composer, how do you stimulate your mind towards something new?
I try to sing a lot. Any idea that I have, I always have a MP3 recorder with me, and anytime that I have an idea, I just sing it and I record it there. So that's something that I have because of a story that happened before. I was having a lot of ideas, and that time I didn't have. I had to do something outside of my house, and when I came back, the idea was gone, and I was really frustrated about that thing. I said I had to stop, so I actually record all my ideas now. I have it right here. It's not on, but it's right.
Do you ever feel blocked as a composer?
I do.
And how do you get unblocked?
I just have to get the time goes by, trust on that, and try to do different activities to stimulate myself in different ways.
For example?
For example, reading a book, try to get, for me it's more than getting knowledge, it's about getting inspiration in the specific point of being creative. A lot of artists, and not necessarily only musicians, had inspired me, and stimulate my intellectual and emotional feelings to actually, keep myself creative.
So other than your family, who inspires you outside of music?
Well, my family actually doesn't inspire me a lot at all because there is no musician in my family that is musician.
I see.
So that's the last source I will look at it. I was born in a completely musical neighborhood, and I would call it artistic neighborhood. It was a poor neighborhood. And
was this in Santa Clara?
In Santa Clara, yeah. The neighborhood, it was called El Condado. And I used to listen a lot of rumba, a lot of carnival music, a lot of people rehearsing in houses, really close to my place. And I have friends. So those were for me the tools, very easy to get information. It was around myself. And I don't have any musician in my previous family, either artists or anything. So I was only, kind of, where is this kid coming from, But I do have to say that my family was really supportive, mostly my mom, that trusted me and let me do what I really wanted to do at the moment that I wanted to do, so I actually could be who I am now.
It's interesting to hear you talk about how you're affected by your surroundings, by your neighborhood, for example. Where do you live in New York?
I live in New York in Washington Heights now.
And so tell me, how does Washington Heights inspire you, or?
It has inspired me in a way. I listen. There is a lot of things that happens in that neighborhood because it's a cross between Dominican and Russians and Jewish. So there is a lot of it's a weird combination thing happening, but it is indifferent now. I don't really see culture in the street. What I see are cars that goes by with music on it. That's a different thing. When you see people playing on the street and you see them how they physically, have an interaction with an instrument. That's for a little kid. That really does affect him more than only sound, because you have two things. You have the sound and you see this guy playing, and you get stimulated by the visual part of it as well. So I mean, right now, that's one of the things that I see differently that it happened to me from Cuba and living outside of Cuba, that I don't see the same relationship in music as I used to have there in Cuba, because it was so natural to me. It wasn't. I never thought that music was going to be a job for me. Once somebody asked me, when did you become a professional musician? I said I never became a professional musician. It wasn't that I became, It was a completely line that didn't broke. So
A kind of natural evolution.
yeah, completely. I mean, kind of the questions like, when did you decide to become a professional musician? I said, I didn't decide that. That was something that I was there already.
So, you arrived in New York about 11 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
How did you know you were ready?
I didn't know I was ready. It was actually more than a willing for me. It was more destiny, to tell you the truth, because I was living in Spain at that time, and I came to Canada and the U.S. to do some touring. And then when I wanted to apply to come back to Europe, they denied my visa for a year because I left without a green card, which I was living in Spain at the time. And they decided that because I left without a green card, then they're gonna give me the penalty of 1 year without giving me the visa. So I had no choice by staying in Canada. And I didn't want to really stay in Canada, even though I had a lot of friends there. But musically, it wasn't interesting to me. So then I have a lot of friends in Canada telling me, it seems like you have to go to New York, because what you really have in mind and what you really want to do, I mean, musically in your career and your life, it is in New York. It is not here or either in Spain. So I made myself strong to think about it, that was the main goal, and I just did. I called a friend, I say, could I stay with you for a couple months, and that was it.
So I would think that you imagined what New York might be like.
I did actually go before that.
Oh, you did? Okay.
And believe me, I didn't really like it that much.
Huh. Why not?
It was very, very distorted, the way the information came to me. And
distorted, what does that mean?
well, distorted was a lot of information coming to me in so fast. Like the street, it was so fast. People were so fast. Everything was so fast. It's distorting to me because of the amount of information that was happening at the same time. So I didn't really like it. I say, wow, I don't know how people can live here. And ironically enough, 2 years later, I was living there, and for a long time.
You established yourself rather quickly.
Mm-hmm.
How does that happen? How do you break into the scene? Obviously, you have to have skill, but
Yeah.
what else?
Well, what I did, I had already known a few musicians like Steve Coleman, Henri, and Brian Lynch, just to mention a few of them. I did know them personally already. So when I got there, I called them and I told them I decided to come here. I'm gonna live here, and they start calling me. But besides that, I had to actually go at night a lot to make people know that I was there. So I had to go to jam sessions, and I'm not a big self seller as others could be, but I just did whatever I had to do, and then I guess by the combination of persistence and whatever you want to call the other one, then I made it.
All during that time, you were still writing?
No, I actually wrote a few tunes when I was in Cuba, but then when I got here. That's one very interesting question that you asked that, because after a year I was here, I started really getting a lot of ideas, and I started thinking more and more that I did have to do my own work. So I started developing in my head what to do, who I am, what I wanted to do, because I used to play in Cuba with a certain band, specifically called Columna B. And that band was for me very, was a challenge. It was my inspiration. We used to exchange a lot of ideas in the four of us, and I learned a lot as well of how to work in a band. So when that broke up and I started doing gigs with different people, there were some people's music that I like a lot, and there were others that I didn't like at all. or not that much. So instantly I try to avoid the ones that I don't like,
Of course.
and I ask myself why I don't like these things, and you know, it's all this combination of things that I really want to express myself. I start believing more in myself, that I really have something that I haven't heard before.
You alluded to something that I have to ask a follow-up.
Okay.
You asked yourself why you liked certain things and why you didn't like other things.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the answer?
Because there is different reasons why you play music, again, and there is people that plays the book in a certain, you know, in a way to say that they play the book, they know what rhythm to play, but for me, music is a little bit more than just do what you have to do. Is the art of giving, as I said before. You have to have that art of giving, as well as somebody that is reading a book to you, and even if the book is not interested, he makes you look that is interesting. And it's the same thing that happens, you know, with sound, with music. So because then I start dealing with a little bit with the Latin scene in New York, which was way different from what I was coming from in Cuba.
How so?
Well, in Cuba, I used to play with this band, Coleman, which it was very, let's put it in a way, avant-garde jazz Cuban sound. And when I came here, everybody had a certain, a more, let's put it to my own way of seeing the Latin scene. It was already dealing with things that we dealt 50 years ago, like with the clavin 2/3, with the tumbao. We were already doing things against the tumbao. Our interest, it wasn't playing the evident thing. It was to contradict the evidence and become not obvious in a way. And that's where arts was becoming for us. And when I got here, I say, oh, really? Do I have to play the clave like this? Do I have to do this like that? Like things that I was really avoiding, because you know, as I said before, it comes in a natural way and in more intuitively way.
But has that changed in the Latin scene in New York?
It does change. It has been changed.
So it's no longer sort of stuck in the Palladium days of Machito and...
Yes, nothing wrong with that, because I actually do love...
We all love that.
And you know, I had big experience with people that actually play that style. But one thing is to play it, and the other thing is to feel that you're identifying that. I always say to people that the music that I play now is the representation of the way I live, who I am. I cannot... you know, make a completely like defend 100% how people were living 50 years ago, because that was actually their time. They did that. The Palladium, they sound like the Palladium, right?
Indeed.
So now we definitely have to sound like now, because that's what we do.
It's like hearing young people try and play like Count Basie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I have nothing wrong, because somebody had to preserve that.
We all love Count Basie.
Yeah, and you know, I always say that if everybody would be as much creative as Charlie Parker or any other musician, the world would be completely a craziness. So you know, somebody had to put the foot on earth, and some others fly.
I know that in addition to playing, teaching, leading your band and composing, you've been teaching at New York University.
Yes.
Are you still there?
Yes, I'm still there.
What exactly do you teach?
I teach ensembles, and I teach private drum lessons as well.
Can you teach someone how to swing?
I can give them a lot of reasons why to swing.
Yeah.
But it is from inside of himself that he finds that. I can tell him where it might be located, but he has to find it on his own. And that's a big difference between somebody that has the knowledge and somebody that is a real performer.
What are the reasons you tell them that you give them for swinging?
Well, first of all, it's a reaction of sound, and you have to really sing while you play. Playing is not a mechanism that only happens in your physical, but it does happen, as you very well know, in your emotional and spiritual thing as well. And you know, it does really makes difference when you find yourself in within the whole amount of knowledge that we have around us. Some people get really lost in the amount of information that we have around, but they cannot find themselves in that amount of information. And the good idea is, since the beginning, and that's one of the things that I tell them, since the beginning of my class, we're looking for yourself in within this amount of information. My intention is not even for you to play like me. I want you to play like the way you want to play. And obviously it comes back to, you know, the same idea of playing what you want to hear. But there is a certain art, and that certain art it involves the arts of God as well. And there is people that has certain talents for perform, and there is some other people that have certain talents to listen. So it is good to really find yourself in within that, you know.
You touched on something about cultural identity. So I want to ask you, when you're listening to a drummer or even an ensemble, can you tell if they are Cuban just from listening?
Yes, pretty much.
And what gives it away?
Well, I can see the same influence that I had, or I try avoid at the same time, that were there at that time. There is certain things that we naturally do in Cuba that it is somehow very different. It has been perceived differently here.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure,
what it
definitely.
is?
Well, a lot of things, like for example, the way we actually the way we feel the clave, and this is something that I have also in my book. It is really in 4 beats. It is not really in 2 bars. Then later on, it has been written in 2 bars clave, and it becomes this double time subdivision thing, which is 2/2. And the way we really feel it is in 1 bar, and because beats should be the pulse, you know, and it's different way to say tang 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 than do tang 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 tang. You see, it's way different when you have that inside of yourself, and the subdivision inside of it. You can see that right now actually with the way in Cuba is played rumba. Right now the rumba in Cuba, it has been gone to way far. There is even another style that it is almost the sister, or is somehow the it evolved to this style. Is called guarapachangueo, and this style itself, it becomes from the rumba scene, but it's a way more complicated, more syncopated. The structure of it is more, I mean, there's a lot of improvisation, a lot of freedom. People really take opportunities and give to the performance a big variety of elements and things that works against each other and stuff like that. Obviously, when you're listening in Cuba, everybody can really dance that, and that happens the same phenomenon in popular music. Music has been developed in a certain way. There is different styles like timba. There is a new style which is, and I'm sure a lot of people that used to dance here in the U.S., for example, they will have somehow difficulties to understand it because they are not surrounded that kind of information. When you have the everyday information, then that's a different story, because it is every day, it comes to you in so many different ways, you know, mostly when you are in the art school, when you have friends and people sing, you know, I mean, any slang word or anything, you put it into clave and they create a coro in 5 seconds, you know, and it's just a very natural way to do it, very, you know, working more with the instincts. So, you know, that makes a big difference, I would say, for, you know, culturally, how does affect, you know, live there and here, what is the difference that I see. And what I see here is that I don't really have that much confrontation with that kind of. I have to go to a club. I have to go to a club and see already a performance, already that. But there is not a lot of cultural, like, jam sessions things that happen every Sunday somewhere, and it represents really the culture of your country. And people that go there, it doesn't necessarily have to be professional musicians. They are the people that actually work during the day, and then that Sunday they just get together and play music. And this is the root, and this is a basic foundation of the culture itself. And I would say that as some of the masters of the style of song, that it is rumba, the matrix, and the inspiration really of a lot of styles that came after that.
Kind of the root.
Yeah, it is.
How much of the music that you'll be performing tonight, how much of it is original?
The all
Of
original.
yours? All originals,
Yes.
okay.
We playing one piece by Don Byron.
Don Byron.
Yeah, because it's a piece of piano and violin, and it is part of the performance itself. We have to do that, and I made the commitment to do that. But we normally, my performance, play all my music. Yes.
So I have to ask you about your own music. Is there a right way to play your music?
So far is the way I play it.
I mean, if people take liberties, say the people in your band, if they want to stretch, if they want to make changes,
everything,
is that okay?
Everything is debatable, and everything is relative. And I do have a clear idea of what I want, and hopefully the musicians that will play the music will have very close idea of what I want.
But are you insistent on them playing?
I am indeed very insistent.
Yes.
Because that's the only way for me to sound like the way I wanted to sound the band, and that's the basic job of being a leader. Besides the fact of writing the music, is how to actually, first of all, to give to the musicians in a right way, you know, the piece of music. It's not just anything. I don't treat it like another thing. For me, it really does means something, and I had a dream with it, and I thought about it, and I put all my energy into it. It's not just another thing, you know.
You mentioned leadership, and I really want to explore that a little bit. I know there are two musicians, both of them play saxophone and both of them compose, with whom you've worked, and I'd like to ask you what it is specifically that you learned from working with Henri Threadgill and Steve Coleman.
I spend myself so much. The understanding and my ears got really open. My imagination got really open. They do both in a way have different ways to actually work on the music. But in within it's the same way I actually try to, as long as you do the basics of what you have to do, then you have the right to express yourself, that's fine, but you have to do certain things in order to actually make the music work.
And what are those things?
You know, like specific rhythm, a specific attitude, and in non-specific tune, what make me to write this, what does this tune means to me? What are we looking in this tune? It's not playing a tune and then when it comes to the changes or something, just blow the hell out of what you want, forgetting of what you've been talking about. Because for me, tunes is like chapters. And you cannot just break things, conversation just like that, like the same conversation we're having right now. If you ask me something and then I answer something else, then we're having an unbelievable conversation.
Kind of surreal.
Yeah, right?
We have had those conversations.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. But you know, the point is to really develop in the solo the themes that you've been working with.
So there are literally stories
Yeah.
inside the music.
Yes, and I try to relate them with the titles, and I have to make, I try to look for a very, an empathy, the title and the content of the music.
Can you give us an example of one of your compositions and how your choice of title or what it is you might explain to your musicians, talk about the story that's in that composition?
Okay. Well, I already explained a little bit of the claveteo,
Yeah.
which was dedicated to the clave. There is another tune that is called C, and that's the tune that gives the title to the quartet, and that tune in Spanish is the C note. The C note, but in Spanish it's actually C, S-I. The note that starts that tune. It starts with the C major chord with the major 7, and that last note, which is B really for us is C. The name of the tune is C, and besides because of the fact that it starts with a note is mostly because it gave me a very positive and optimistic attitude when I was writing it. It had these two themes happening one after the other with two different meters, but it's pretty melodic. It's really it's melodic and it's not aggressive at all. So it was very optimistic to me to hear, when it was coming out the way I was. So that's basically why I had it that name on it. There is another tune that works a lot with the 7 chords and stuff like that, and I did it in 7, in the middle of 7, and there were a lot of 7 chords, minor and major 7 chords in it. So I was working with coming in and out of a 7 chord in a melodic way, and that's a tune that is played by melodica and a soprano. You will hear it tonight, and it features the bass and myself. And I put a 7x7 because of the fact that also it was dealing with a meter in 7. So I had the 7 chords dealing with the 7 things. So it was too much a coincidence of 7 happening at the same time. So I put a 7x7. But there is different others themes that had the same thing. Ilu Uli, for example, is a great example of it, because this is a research that I started doing of optical illusions.
Optical illusions.
Yes, and then I did some research on that, and through that information I start figuring out how can I create a sound optical a sound illusion. So rhythmically first, which I start actually the tune by playing the rhythm by myself, and then you can see when the bass and the piano comes in, there is a certain illusion that happens because it's actually octaves that are going down half step. Then I try to create the same sensation when I was actually doing the melodic part, which the melody itself is very simple, but I had the first time it does it in one tonic, and then becomes a half tonic down, so it had the same kind of illusion at the same time, and plus this elusive rhythmic structure that I create, that I can actually sing it right now if you want. Okay, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Tang tong 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 1. So you becomes this thing which is very elusive sonically, and it creates that false reality in a way. To put it that way, so that's another example.
That's fascinating. The idea of false reality, false consciousness.
Yeah.
In some ways. Do you ever revise your compositions over time?
I do, some of them, but generally not.
So when you're writing, how do you know when you're done?
I have a feeling for it. This is a feeling. When I have to arrange, then I have to look at it, and I might actually change a few things. But normally, I don't really have that much time to look what I've done back. Sometimes I don't even remember. Sometimes I listen to tunes that I did 5 years ago, and I say, I don't remember how I wrote that. I see and I can hear what I meant, but the source of it, in terms of the chords that are involved and the inside of it, I completely forgot because I move on. So that's something really fascinating that happened to me, and frustrating at the same time, because I write it on the piano, and then when I give the music to the musicians, that every time that I do this gesture, it almost means bye-bye from my brain. It stays for a while, and then I move on to some other idea, because I always have some other ideas to move on to.
I think now might be an appropriate time to take any questions that our audience has. Oh wow, there are quite a few people. First, I have a question for the audience.
Sure.
Do we have any drummers here? Yes, okay.
Oh.
All right. So I'm hoping that somebody has a question, and we'll start us off. Yes, sir.
Not too long ago, we learned that Dexter Gordon listened to Sibelius and Debussy. I understand Debussy. I'm curious about Sibelius. But anyway, I was wondering if there was anybody you listened to who impressed you and affected your composition.
Okay, let me repeat the question into the microphone for the sake
Sure.
of the webcast. The question has to do with who he listens to and is basically inspired by.
Well,
And why?
Yeah, specifically about that connection between Lester Gordon that you mentioned, and being influenced by classical music and maybe some other kind of music. I was trained in Cuba 8 years of classical training. I self-taught on drums. So what I did, it was actually classical percussion. So I played mallets, and I played sets, and I learned how to play a snare, and I learned to play any percussion in the classical music world. I have a lot of composers that had actually I have learned from them. Stravinsky, Bartók, Johann Sebastian Bach, which is actually for me.
Can you say what you learned from Stravinsky,
Well,
Bartók, and Bach?
I learned how to deal with textures and sound. I learned that it's possible to manifest in sound those dreams that we were talking about. That it is possible, and it's the same thing that happened with me with Henri Treigle. When I heard Henri Treigle's music the first time, I was in the shelf of a friend of mine house that I used to stay in Canada actually, and I said to him, "Give me something new. Nothing to do with straight ahead jazz or anything that is famous or anything that is more commercial known and not necessarily has to be of my interest." So he know what I was looking for, and he say, "Oh, I have a guy for you." And he got me a first, the Henri Treigle's record. And when I heard it, I was so astonished to hear that was very close of what the music that I might hear in my dreams, and when I wake up, I forget. It's a surrealistic music in a way, without putting in any category or anything. But it's a music that he has a different cosmogony, let's put it that way. He has a different conception of sound than some others. So he had found the path of how to give that information, how to express that information. And that's a very interesting and very important fact, because you always can see also musicians that they feel frustrated for a long period of time, or maybe for the rest of their life, because they are not able to really express themselves, what they really wanted to do. The only thing they have done is to learn what others have done. But if you want to be creative, you definitely do need to find yourself. And I've learned from Johann Sebastian Bach counterpoint and the art of fugue, which is an unbelievable structure set of in music, and it has to do a lot with mathematics, and it has to do a lot with how to actually you really construct. It's very structured, so it becomes kind of almost like as much discipline in a way than the art of how to make a building, in itself. And Bartók itself, it has this nationalism ideas, but already flashed or already covered by his own aura, by his own sound inside. And as some of you know, he did an amazing work with Hungarians songs, and he went outside that a lot of this music, it was already almost coming into an end in terms of a lot of all these old people that
folkloric
the
music.
folkloric music I'm talking about. And he went and he dedicated his time to record these people, and he actually have done arrangements for it, and he put them down in a piece of paper, so people can have it for prosperity. So, and there is a lot of different music. I do listen to enormous amount of music, more than, but in the diversity of it from anywhere, from India, from Africa, from Indonesia. I mean, anything. It doesn't really have to do with I'm in love with a certain style, because what I'm trying to do is actually take out the style word itself.
Who else has a question? Yes, right here.
I actually have 3 questions.
Three? Wow.
Keep them brief, please.
I'm limited to one.
No, I just say keep them brief.
Okay, well, first one being, are you able to play all the instruments that you compose for?
Okay, let's take them one at a time. Are you able to play all the instruments you compose for?
No, I'm not able to play them, but I'm able to imagine them, how it could be played.
Okay. And what's your process of composing?
It comes from so many different sources. Sometimes it comes from a simple melody, sometimes it comes from a rhythm line, sometimes it comes from the bass line, sometimes it comes from a bunch of harmonic changes that I have in my mind that day, sometimes it comes from a piece of art that I see, sometimes it comes from a conversation we having, and it comes from so many different sources.
And third question being, are you going to be making regular stops into DC?
He wants to know how often you'll come back to
I
DC.
would love to, as much as they have me. I'm there. I mean, I'm willing to spread what I do as much as I can. It doesn't really necessarily depend only on me, unfortunately, but we're making the best we can.
That's right. Who else has a question? We only have time for a few more, so right here.
Question: if you were teaching limb independence 101, what would be some of the things that you talk about?
He wants to know how you would teach limb independence.
Okay. Well, there is different ways. It really depends on the subject specifically that we were talking about. But But the main thing is to deal with different layers in your brain. How could you actually be able to do one rhythm, put it in the back of your brain, and deal with something else? Okay, so that rhythm, it becomes something that you're doing almost in the subconscious level, like unconscious level more than so. It's actually being able to create that path from in and out of these different two places, basically in a very analytical way. Then it becomes the physical issue, and that's a different thing. You can have that very clear, but if your limbs are not really together, if you're not conscious of the fact of how to create a sound in the same at the right time and the right place, how you wanted to make it, then we have to deal with that as well. But there is different. It really depends of the amount of complexity that you deal in that rhythm itself.
And you have to exercise the creative muscle.
Exactly,
Yes.
as well.
Yes. One last question in the back.
So, have you ever been motivated to do with your feet what you can so expertly and amazingly do with your hands? Which is to say, have you ever been motivated towards two bass drums or a double pedal? And why or why not?
He wants to know whether you've thought about using double bass drum or doing with your feet what you do with your hands.
Well, for me, they are two different things. And I do try to do with my feet what I do with my hands, without the two bass drums. Which means there is a lot of independence that I do actually with my feet, because my hands might be busy at that time. And then I do with my feet. The two bass drums, I never really been that much into it. It is something that it is not organic to me, and it's the same thing that happened with playing the clave in the left foot. That happens to a lot of people that want to play in Latin music or Cuban music. I just doesn't feel natural to me. It doesn't feel natural to me that I have the same sound basically in my two feet.
Okay, let me actually take the last question, and I will ask you, as a drummer, as a band leader, as a composer, how do you measure success?
What do you mean? Measure my success. I mean, everything that has come through my life, I've tried to learn from it, and as much as I try to learn, I try to give back to life. I have a lot of things that I would like to do more. I would love to have the time to really do it, because it becomes sometimes a busy life. But I would say the success in itself is really relative, because there is a lot of people that are way more successful than me, and there is a lot of people that are way less successful than me. So where that put myself, it is in the in a way I always think that I could have more opportunities to express myself. That's something that I really can say humbly to you. I would love to have more expose of my work and more challenge of making new creations and things like that. That's something, but the success in itself, it is what I take home. That's something that I take home with me, and I feel reward on my own and personal way, despite the fact of people basically appreciating my work, which I do appreciate a lot, because the word it was no art if it weren't you. There is not sound without an ear, basically, in that way. But you know, the success to me is mostly about how much work I can put out there for you guys. That's basically, and I will love more. That.
There's always more,
Yeah.
and we wish you continued success. Please
Yeah,
help me
well,
thank,
thank you.
Dafnis Prieto. Real pleasure.
From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.,